Greetings all, BWS2K here with some exciting news for this video. The brief version is this weekend. I got a little antsy, wanted to roll some dice, so I made a random hack generator for Cortex, and folks liked it, and it ended up on Twitter. So if you're not a Twitter person, that's or if you're not connected with them on Twitter, Cortex RPG is the Twitter address over there. And you can see all the slides, but we're going to go through them here, and I will link in the description to the Google Doc where I have all this in a far less exciting visual format. So we're going to roll dice, and I know that some folks don't like dice to be rolled, like the sound and stuff, so I will actually mute when I do that, and I have included, like, you're supposed to roll a d12 twice, so I've actually just included 2 d12s in my roll, so I'm only going to be rolling once, so it'll be muted for just that moment, and then I'll unmute and come back. So this is going to bring us through the process of a randomly generated hack, a Cortex game, and I'm really excited. If you've watched the channel for any amount of time, you know that I really like random character generation and anything that has to do with like random tables. I like pulling the threads and like finding the story and finding the character, or finding, in this case, like the entire setting. So we're gonna roll, and then we're gonna take a break, and then we're gonna come back, and I'm just gonna kind of share as I'm thinking through stuff, and then see where it all ends. All right, so let's go ahead and roll. I will make sure to mute in post, and then I will unmute when I'm done. Okay, so let's sort them out real quick. Oops, bumping my camera. That was a 3. This was a 5. All right, so the two genres that we are mashing up are 9 and 10, which are teen and fantasy. I ran out of room on that note card, so I'm going to switch to a different one. Okay, and then go to the next slide. For our D10, we rolled a 10, which is Heist. All right. The cards are stick together. All right. Next slide is we roll d8s until we get 2 prime sets. So we have a 3 and a 5, so that's resources and attributes. But we're going to have to reroll again because resources is not a prime set. So we still got to use it, but we have to roll again. So I'll mute for that in a second here. So we've got resources, which kind of sounds fun in a heist subgenre. And what was the other one I said? 3 and a 5. 5 is attributes. And okay, we're gonna roll again. Skills. So we've got resources, attributes, and skills. Next slide is the D6 for our must-use mod, which for us is action-based resolution. It's a 5. What's nice is when they mocked this up, they put the page numbers there too. So that's what you're seeing. Life points is on page 43, add all the dice is on page 25, etc., which is really handy. Okay, so that's our D6 for the must-use mod. And then finally, for the D4, we rolled a 3. This is the prime conflict. For us is going to be heroes versus villains. Ooh, this is really interesting here. They're all interesting, let's be honest. Heroes versus villains. All right, so I'm going to gently close this. Move the wire out of the way. So our genre mashup was teen fantasy, but the subgenre is heist. We are going to use resources, attributes, and skills. We're going to be using action-based resolution, and our primary conflict is going to be heroes versus villains. Are your wheels turning already? My wheels are turning already. Okay, so we're going to go think about this, and then we'll come back at some future time. Okay, so what if so let me back up. I spent last night looking up on Wikipedia the different genres and taking some notes, and here's what I found. Fantasy is a genre of speculative fiction involving magical elements, typically set in a fictional universe and sometimes inspired by mythology and folklore, distinguished from the genres of science fiction and horror by the respective absence of scientific or macabre themes, though these genres overlap. So my thoughts regarding that and mythology and magic, I immediately thought of Prometheus or Persephone and Hades, because those both kind of jive with the heist feel and mythology feel, right? But those aren't concrete thoughts, and they're not even going to make it. This is very rough drafty still. So the heist genre notes that I took were that it focuses on the planning, execution, and aftermath of a large robbery. So obviously the focus is the robbery, but that almost exclusively the story follows the people who are committing the crime rather than others. And so kind of like translating that into Cortex, I thought that feels like a good reason to just have crisis pools as the opposition rather than fully forming out like a boss GMC at the moment. Again, all this is subject to change, but it feels like if we want the focus to be on the main characters and how they prepare and follow along, then I don't want to throw a whole lot of spotlight onto the bosses themselves. So it may just be that it's kind of all absorbed into this crisis pool with maybe some interesting SFXs or something. And then the teen genre plots based on their special interests, such as coming of age, attempting to fit in, bullying, peer pressure, first love, teen rebellion, conflict with parents, and teen angst or alienation. So the coming of age thing started to kind of tie in because I was already kind of drifting in this direction of like having a school or like I think I actually said at the beginning that it felt like maybe there was something to do with their classes, like the classes that they were taking. So this feels like maybe at graduation there's some big event and they don't get to pass unless they are able to steal something or boost something or I don't know, some magical artifact or trinket, MacGuffin. So I didn't really have any notes as far as distinctions yet. My thoughts on attributes, I just started listing some alternatives to the normal physical, mental, social, emotional. I threw out mundane, material for more of like the physical kind of things, maybe magic, of course, or mythic, manners, which is more social, mind for mental. Of course, mental also would work. It starts with it. I'm just kind of riding that alliteration. I'm on the fence, shaken and stricken. It depends on where I land in terms of gritty or not. Remember, our primary conflict is this heroes versus villains, and we have action-based resolution, which is that's essentially Marvel heroic, right? That's a lot of trading and going back and forth with like slugfesty kind of stuff, which is could be very gritty and also could be very very fantasy and not gritty. Okay. Skills, my only notes there were just that some options for skills were roles, which is a mod, and specialties, which are mods. So when I concocted this whole thing, my goal in mind was as prompts to sort of inspire your muse. If it turns out that you wanted to use something that doesn't show up on your sheet, like for instance, I didn't roll up Doompool, but if I want to use Doompool, I can. I have to use the things that I rolled up, but I can add more things in, more sets, relationships, etc. But it's just kind of a prompt. This process is kind of a prompt to get things moving in a direction. And then resources. My notes on resources, I'm sort of just thinking out loud in a sense, right? But the things that are being stolen or assembled, are they the things that are in anticipation of the last showdown? But that sounds more like assets. So are the resources like maybe boons that are given to them from class so that they have to kind of with their pod go on these missions, and then just sort of my generic notes kind of more or less written by, well, my notebook never shows up on camera, but there's a lot of scribbling all over the pages. Is there something here that grants wishes, which would be like a really big deal, or maybe like some minor wishes? Something that I like about Trace 2.0 is they have this map, and the map has different ratings for like the crime that's in it, and then you go through and reduce the crime in those areas. So is part of the heist in stages, and is there a way that we have those stages rated, or regions, whether it's linear or whether it's more like a geographical thing, whether it's through time or space or both. And I did also, fantasy immediately suggests certain contexts, but it's not limited to those contexts. So what if we had this taking place in a more or less modern time? What happens if we put it in the past? What happens if we put it in the future? What happens if we put it on a different planet? I like to kind of just go in those directions, and it shows in all of the scribblings on my notebook. So all that being said, are there different awards that all lead to this epic showdown? So in other words, you're working towards this finale, and then maybe the crisis pool itself. If every time you choose to do a stage, you're buying time and you're buying resources, or you're buying something, assets or something, but that's allowing the crisis pool to grow. So it's kind of do I want to go unprepared but quickly at a smaller crisis pool, or do I want to take my time to build stuff up but then be going against a more formidable crisis pool? And then I wrote, graduation from school is contingent upon a successful heist. So I think there's a tie in there somewhere to it. And then I just had this quote. I wrote it down earlier, just kind of off the cuff: skipping class to steal magic, which is a different vibe on everything I just said, but it feels kind of like the most fun vibe. And that's really the challenge, right? With a lot of these random things is, okay, I have this random stuff and I can make it work, but is it fun? Is it something I would play? Is it something anybody would play? And I'm very much hovering still. For me personally, there's always this moment, and I know exactly what the moment is with each of the different games that I've made, the different hacks. And I'll be washing the dishes, for instance, with High Pressure. I was washing the dishes downstairs, and as I'm washing the dishes, I'm thinking through, like, what's the point? And then I thought, pushing stress. If I link pushing stress to the ability die, so that it's like they're straining themselves, and then like that's my eureka moment. Like, that to me feels like a linchpin that I can then build off of, and I don't have that yet for this. So and I suspect it's going to actually be something to do with the resources more than anything, because it feels like, to me, it feels like the resources are actually going to end up being I don't even have a good word for it, but it's like, it's that moment, it's that thing, which is not necessarily like mechanically it shows forth, but like in my mind when I'm thinking it out, like, what's the story? What am I going to hang this on? It ends up being the hook, maybe, is the way to do it when you're talking like literary, story writing and stuff. Like, what's your hook? Like, I don't have my hook yet. But this is where I'm at. That's my quick update, and I am anxious and excited to see what the future holds. Thanks for following along. We got dragons. That's the hook. That's what we were waiting for. You can read it on the screen. Modern day, you're dragonlings, like young dragons, teenage dragons, and you're establishing your horde. It may not be a mountain of gold. It might be classic cars. It might be fashionable clothes. It might be video game consoles. It might be really crucial information stored on a USB drive, and you just like throw those all in a pile with everything else. That's the idea. So distinctions, one of the distinctions could be related to the kind of dragon you are, like an ice dragon or a tree dragon or whatever kind of other dragons there are, and then have like an SFX related to stepping up things when you do related to that thing, ice, tree, or whatever. Resources will be like use of your magic just in general, like kind of like a magic, kind of like hero die actually a little bit, but like you're young, so you have a limited amount of magical ability, potential, whatever to use before it gets refreshed. We'll have specialties, which will be related to the heisting, boosting cars, hacking computers, breaking into safes, picking locks, coercion and seduction, that sort of thing. What else did I write? Oh, my attributes. So for attributes, we're going to go with might, which is like strength and vigor, mind, which is like your intellect, but more than intellect, it's like thinking through things, right? And then we're going to have magic, which is like relying heavily on the magic stuff, and then manners, which is like your charisma stuff. And then the skills, distinctions, clothes, yeah. So maybe riding the heroes versus villains, maybe there's like an anti-dragon agency or something like that that's guarding these places, or maybe there's just like a police force that is specifically anti-dragon. Maybe all of you have like shape-shifting, basic shape-shifting to look like normal humans, so you can kind of blend a little bit. And then the kind of like the opposite of that, like your enemy is this anti-dragon agency. I'll have to come up with a cool name for that. I don't even have a cool name for this, though I'll tell you right now that since we're talking about teenage dragons, I think I want the title, and this is just at the moment, don't quote me on this, but I think at the moment the title is going to be something like Dragons or whatever. But it's been a long time since I've been a teenager, so I don't know if teenagers still say whatever. I don't know that, but anyways, that's my dragon moment. That's my hook, and I wanted to share it with you. That's my quick update, and I guess I'll see you next time. All right, so we have a final product, play testable, at any rate, and I just called it BW's Dragon Heist game for the sake of ease. This is a game that combines the fantasy and teen genres and heist subgenre, focusing primarily on heroes versus villains conflict, utilizing distinctions, attributes, skills, and resources as sets, and then action-based resolution as a mod. This is a game where player characters are young dragons making their first foray out of their nest and into the modern world, tasked by their mother, the mother dragon, to acquire new treasures for her hoard. So, the hook was that it was modern day, that you are dragons who are being sent out by the mother dragon to obtain and acquire new treasures for her hoard. So it's not necessarily going to be gold. It could be new video game consoles, I think was one of the examples I used. It could be Nintendo Switch. I guess that's a video game console, isn't it? But I mean, it could be anything, any modern day things, treasures that would qualify. So there's some fun elements to it, some lightheartedness. The sets and mods are all very straightforward and simple, so a lot of the emphasis of the game is going to be on just the lightheartedness and the having fun role-playing teen dragons who maybe are not super familiar with some of the modern conveniences or things that we take for granted. I have in here written, I'll scroll down as we read through in a second, but the idea that they can assume a sort of a human form, so they can be out in public, but they can also manifest their draconic abilities as well. So 3 distinctions: I command the element of whatever, and that's going to relate to the kind of dragon that you kind of want to be. My mother taught me, and this is sort of like sage advice from the mother dragon, which all of these distinctions have hinder. So you might be following that advice, you may not be following that advice, you may find that advice is not so much true. And then the third one is I always say, and that's where your motto comes in, your life outlook, your motto, your catchphrase. Again, that also has hinder because maybe you're not following your own advice. We have attributes, which we broke down into magic, manners, mark, might, and mind, which you can read about there on the screen of what they pertain to. And then for roles, we did manipulator, master, mech, mover, and muscle. And that kind of covers those basic things, all using M. And then I have it written in here for resources. Someone suggested on the Discord that I call them, instead of resources, that I call them mantles, which I really like. At one point I went with Moxie, but I felt like Moxie doesn't exactly line up with the vibe that I'm going for. Certainly if you play this, you can rename these things and do whatever you like, add in other mods and stuff too if you wanted to. And then of course action-based resolution. Now these questions you may remember from the first document that I had at the bottom, there were these questions, so I went ahead and filled them out here, and we can discuss them real briefly before I bring this whole process to a close. What does the combination of sets and mods signal to prospective players? I already kind of mentioned that. These are pretty simple things, simple mods and simple sets. There's nothing super complicated about them. Something like relationships and values can get into trait statements and things can be challenged and such, but that's not the case here. So this is more like one-shot minded, or you're not really looking to a long number of sessions, a big number of sessions. This is just like getting together and having those fun moments where you're playing teenage dragons and somebody gets to play the mother dragon, which is fun too, and you're doing heisty things, but always with that sort of flavor and that bent. Who should play this game? Anyone looking for some lighthearted heisty fun with a dragony twist, and that's pretty much what it boils down to, right? What do characters do in a session? So you have that idea that the mother dragon is sort of assigning the task, giving the briefing, and then you have this time period where you're sort of building up assets and establishing relationships and planning and probably engaging in some fun role-playing as well, and then you actually go out and you do the heist, and that's going to likely be a crisis pool, which again are pretty low maintenance, low prep for a narrator to come up with a pool of dice to just represent the opposition, but you can do fun things with SFXs in the crisis pool, or you could use GMCs, fully fleshed out GMCs as well. Just remember the hero versus villains being the primary conflict, and I included it here, but like this anti-dragon, maybe there's like this secret task force who knows about the existence of dragons, so they sometimes get contracted to like hired to protect and secure these high-profile targets. So like So there's sort of this secret war going on, right, between the PCs and this sort of like enemy organization. What does the narrator have to do? They have to come up with the task, which in and of itself, sorry, words this evening, in and of itself is a lot of fun because you get to kind of come up with modern day equivalents to like gold and treasure and things like that. And then how do characters grow? In this game, I didn't really feel that they needed to. I didn't really feel that was kind of a necessary component to what we do. But if you wanted to, you could certainly implement that. And like I said, you could implement other mods and sets. That's not against the random rules. It's just the random rules are you have to roll, or you have to use what you roll. So I was very excited. I really enjoyed this process, and I am over the moon that Melly passed it along to the crew, and it got made into these beautiful slides. And I'll link to the tweet again in this video at the bottom in the description where you can find those. But of course, you can see them at the beginning of this video as well. Anything else to cover? No, I think that's it. So I will stop talking, but thanks so much for watching. If you have any comments, questions, observations, feedback, if you did this yourself and you want to share, you can share down in the comments section. Though, of course, you can share over on the Cortex role-playing Discord as well. And if you do, definitely tag me, because I'm curious to see what y'all come up with. I know some folks have already done that and had some really interesting creations. So, again, thanks so much for watching, and we will catch you next time. Thanks so much.